All right, hey guys, today we're going to talk about two sides on the debate with the writing of the Constitution and how they resolve all of that. And while things were heated and very frustrating for those men, they were able to negotiate and get what they wanted, each side. And that's something I really want you to appreciate here, because in politics today, it seems no one ever negotiates to get to a solution. So the essential question is, if you're reading an early government document, how would you know which side, Federalist or Anti-Federalist, the author was on? So what things would they say that would tip you off to which side they're on? So we need to write in Federalist opinions here and Anti-Federalist opinions at the end. All right, so two sides, Federalists. The Federalists were supporters of the Constitution. I think of the F there, for the Constitution, so they were supporters of it. They included large landowners, merchants, and farmers. So there's a wide variety of people here that were seemingly seeing how important it was to have a constitution, a stronger document than the Articles of Federation. Many in the North are in this well-organized group, so New England area is heavy Federalist territory. Famous Federalists are George Washington, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton. Two of these three will go on to become president, Washington and Madison. Alexander Hamilton will not, because he was not born in the United States. Okay, the Federalist Papers are going to be a summary of 85 essays, and these essays were written to persuade the public to get them to support this Constitution. Remember, after having a king and coming out from the Revolutionary War and the monarchy and taxes and no taxation without representation, some of these people are going to be afraid to have a leader. Again, they're afraid that person will take too much power. So these essays, the Federalist Papers, are just a bunch of papers, essays, to try to persuade people in favor of the stronger federal government and to help them get rid of their fear. It's there Madison and Hamilton and Jay. Jay will write a few of the beginning essays, then he gets sick and he's unable to write more. Hamilton writes some of the essays, and Alexander Hamilton writes the most. So they explain the Constitution, what they want to do with it, and why it's necessary to have a stronger government. They're printed in the New York newspapers from 1787 to 1788. That's important to note, because that's the only way to get people to see them, by publishing them in the newspaper, because back then everyone is going to read a newspaper. That's their main way of communicating news. It should make sense that Madison is going to support this Constitution, since he is considered the father of the Constitution, the primary writer of the Constitution. He is pretty much a genius, in my opinion. So he takes the philosophers that he studied. He is a total bookworm nerd, and he will study all these men like Locke, but also Montesquieu, and he will philosophize on his own and come up with what we know as our three branches of government in our federal government. I want to show you a couple of pictures. Here are those Federalists I was talking about. Supported a strong federal government. They are not afraid of having a leader. They see the importance of that. This is Alexander Hamilton, the one that will not be present in the list I was mentioning earlier. This is James Madison. He will later be president. Right now, he's going to be the writer of the Constitution, the primary writer. And this is John Jay, who will serve on the Supreme Court. Okay, I also want to show you this. It's a good way to distinguish these guys from one another. The Federalists are going to push this collection of essays to support the Constitution. They wanted to show how the new Constitution would solve the problems that had arisen during the Articles of Federation. they combined these three to write 85 essays, and they wanted a strong central government. I'll come back to this on the Anti-Federalists in just a minute. Okay? So then you have the Anti-Federalists, and these are people who oppose the Constitution. They're called anti, they're against. They don't really oppose a federal government, but they just thought the federal government should not be the supreme government that it is today. They thought that would give it too much power, and they're very worried about that. Many in this group were Western farmers. Okay, they want a Bill of Rights added to the Constitution to protect individual citizens' rights, the rights of the people, my rights. And they said, no, this is way too much about federal government, like the Congress and what they can do, and the president, the executive branch. And they were certainly scared of that because that reminded them of a king. And then the judiciary, the Supreme Court, all that just frightened them. They said, we need an addition to this Constitution that's only for individual people and will protect their rights. Famous anti-federalists are John Hancock, Patrick Henry, who's going to say, give me liberty or give me death, remember, in the Revolution, and Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson, who will also be president, is an anti-federalist, and you need to remember that because he will carry those beliefs all the way through his presidency, that the federal government should be limited and smaller. But here's the thing, they had nothing to offer in place of the Constitution. They didn't really have a strong alternative that they could propose, okay? So, Bill of Rights. So these are the Bill of Rights. They're tacked now on to the end of our Constitution. So you can think of like the Federalists are going to support the Constitution. The Anti-Federalists are going to push this Bill of Rights. So they both kind of have their hand in it. I want to show you this cartoon from today. I think it is so, well, it's 2009, but it's still very applicable to today's politics. It says the Bill of Rights, dueling axes, and they're chopping down individual freedoms in the name of war on terror, for example, like this hits with 9/11, where your phone conversations can be listened to by the government, your computer transactions, things you do on computer communications, whatever can be monitored by the federal government. And some people would say that's a violation of your privacy. Then you have war on guns by the Democrats. These were the Republicans. Democrats who are represented by the donkey, who are going to say that no one should have weapons or very limited weapons, gun control, and other folks are going to say that violates their right to bear arms. So you notice both sides, Republican and Democrat, chopping down individual freedoms today. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to move to what the Anti-Federalists do write, and that is letters from a federal farmer. So we said the Federalists wrote the Federalist Papers. That means the Anti-Federalists are going to write letters from a federal farmer, and you can remember that a lot of them were farmers. So the fight for ratification, and what does that mean? Ratify means to approve or to pass. So we're trying to pass this Constitution so we can start governing. By July 1788, all states had ratified or passed the Constitution, except not Rhode Island and not North Carolina. North Carolina wanted to wait until the Bill of Rights were completely added, and then they promised that they would ratify, which they do. But here they're holding out for that Bill of Rights. Rhode Island did not like the Constitution because they're such a tiny state. And they felt like that all this federal government power would detract from them, would basically be used against them, and they wouldn't have a leg to stand on because they're such a small state. So they oppose it altogether. So then it says George Washington. So George had gone home, and he had retired from the military. Here's George. George, say hello to the peeps. Okay, George had retired from the military, and he had decided that he was going to go home to Mount Vernon and just retire after the Revolutionary War, right, George? And so he was going to retire and, live a peaceful life after the war. And yet everyone has a different plan for George. They call him up to come to this ratification process, which he does. He is, as you'll learn later, an excellent leader. He stays out of trying to persuade either side, and is very non-biased. And they pick him to secede and take this on, and it says, would it work? The Constitution is signed September 17th, 1787. It goes into effect 1789. And so we finally get this strong central government that the Articles of Confederation would not provide us. Okay, so with that, we have the addition of the Bill of Rights. And I just want to say this is really ironic that the writer of the individual freedoms and the thing, remember, this is the thing, Bill of Rights, that the anti-federalists wanted, is going to be James Madison, a Federalist. So why would a Federalist write the Bill of Rights? It's a quandary for some people to understand why would he do that. One is he was the writer of the Constitution, the father of the Constitution. And so maybe he felt like, okay, if we're going to add these Bill of Rights, it should be me that writes them because, I've written everything else and it'll help it flow and make sense. The other part of it is Madison is a real man. He is a leader. He is a true leader. And he's going to say, I know that that's not really what I wanted originally, but I'm willing to write it if that will help bring these anti-federalists over and they will sign the deal. So he negotiates, compromises, and he says, all right, I wasn't for this, but I will write them to support the anti-federalists. What a leader that is. Well, you don't have that today at all. So the Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. You need to write in what each one is. So you got freedom of speech for the First Amendment. It has 5 parts: speech, religion, press, petition, assembly. So you can say what you want to say within reason. You cannot today violently threaten the President of the United States or something, or yell fire in a public building. But, you can have disagreements and speak aloud about things you disagree with. Religion, religious tolerance, and religious freedom. Press, that we can have newspapers that print whatever. They're not controlled by the government. Petition, you can sign a petition saying you want something done. And assembly, you can assemble. 2, you have 2 arms. So 2, right to bear arms, which this would be weapons. And many thought that was for the militias. 3, no quartering of soldiers. Remember, that goes back to the pre-Revolutionary War when George Grenville came up with that plan. 4, no illegal search and seizure. 5, you cannot be forced to testify against yourself and tell on yourself. Today we say, I plead the 5th. 6, you have the right to a lawyer, someone who will argue and defend you in court. 7, you have the right to trial by jury. So a jury to decide your fate, not one harsh judge. 8, no cruel or unusual punishment. 9 is my rights. The people's rights are not limited to what they could put on paper. We have more rights than they could ever give us, such as natural rights that are not listed in here. People's rights. So I think I get mine first, 9, and then 10 states get theirs. My rights first, 9, then 10 states' rights. States' rights could be like keeping up roads, or school, like school calendar, and what we teach in school is all the state of North Carolina decides. Okay, I want to very quickly show you 2 things. One is going to be how North Carolina and Rhode Island, the federal pillars, don't want to go along with that Constitution. North Carolina, not without a Bill of Rights. Rhode Island, not altogether. And you see they were worried about it all falling apart. Okay, and the other is this quick infographic I want to show you. I would probably pause this if I was you and just look at it carefully about all the amendments, okay? All right, I didn't have time, but you need to go back and compare Federalist to Anti-Federalist for the essential question and write your summary.